Thanks, Anupama. All right, welcome back, everyone. It's great to be here. This is the first time I'm here because, like Anupama said last time, I was like the Wizard of Oz, right? Like the big face that you have up there. So I couldn't travel last time, so I was doing that. My wife was upset with me because she said I didn't clean the room because this is like expanded view, right? You see every single dirt behind. So hopefully that was okay. Again, great to be here. Let's get started. You saw the topic. I'll go through this, and then we can see what this is basically about. For those of you who don't know me, I've been with the company for 12 years. So if you don't know me, I'm not doing something right. I was the head of the solutions architecture unit for the longest time. And very recently, I took over the role heading all of the solutions stuff at WSO2. And I'll talk about that a little bit as well. Right? But I'll talk to you about one of my passions, maps. So when I was in university, I really got into this area, basically starting to look at mapping and how do you do digital mapping. Let's just do a pulse read of the room, right? Show of hands if you have not used a paper map for driving. If you have not, right? Show of hands. You haven't used? Okay. Come on, higher. So you have not used a paper map for driving. Okay, that's very interesting. That's more than 50% of the room. Frank, obviously you used a paper map for driving, right? So I've used enough paper maps for driving. So that's a good sense of how young the room is. Either you are young or you haven't been driving. One of the two, right? But paper maps were a thing. Right? You see this picture, you have people poring over maps, you hold a torchlight in the night to figure out like where the route is. In Sri Lanka, we have these things because the men don't ask for directions, right? You have this thing, right? So you finally, the wife rolls down the window and asks the three-wheel guy where the place is. And you have a tuk-tuk or three-wheel driver equivalent anywhere in the world, right? So maps, there's a lot of work that goes into building these paper maps. I'm a PhD dropout, right? So I started my PhD in my passion. So when I told my father I was a PhD dropout, he was not too happy. But now you can say this, right? It's a trending thing. There's lots of success stories about being a PhD dropout, right? So my thesis was around how to digitize maps, how to basically make this better, how to do navigation around this. In computer science, you would have learned about shortest path first. You would have learned about traveling salesman problem, all of these algorithms, right? Like how do you apply all of these onto maps? And then you have now variations of shortest path first, right? You have fuel efficient path, most scenic path. Like these are all different algorithms that gets layered on top of this. But there's a lot of work that goes into creating a digital map, right? So if you so this is Grass GIS. This was like you can think of it as like the Unix of mapping, right? And you'd write code to generate something. And to generate a single map, you have to take around 12 different layers, layer them one above the other, and then you write some code and out pops a graphical view, right? And that was like magic, right, for us. So you have to do topography, elevation, you have something called parcel information, you have cities, you have roads, you have flooding zones. So you layer all of these and you get something out of that, right? But a couple of years down my PhD line, these guys came out, right? Google Maps. And they abstracted the whole damn thing, right? So that's what happened. So then you had people looking into these problems, and you had things like Google Maps. So Rania spoke about this. She said, I can't go anywhere without Google Maps, right? So Google Maps, and by the way, this is not introduced by Google Maps. So they launched something in 2005. Google being Google, they got a lot of visibility around this. But they did this by acquiring an Australian company, I think a German company as well, the company who was the predecessor for Google Earth. So all of this put together, and that's how Google Maps came out, right? But what it allowed you to do was to say, here's point A, this is where I am. Here's point B, this is where I need to get to. Tell me how to get there, right? And then no longer do you need to like ask the tuk-tuk driver, now Google Maps tells you. And you started creating other use cases, right? People said that Now I can drive in the night because I can actually see where the road turn-off is. I don't need to peer out and see where the road turn-off is because Google Maps is accurate enough that it can show me these things. So it's really abstracting the problem to a level where you've started forgetting about the underlying complexities of this, right? And there's lots of complexities, but that's an abstraction. Now, once these abstractions happen, that allows you to create innovative applications on top of those abstractions. And this is only possible if you solve the underlying problem, right? So this is Uber, right? Interesting thing in that, if you can see that, this is JFK. This is Manhattan to JFK. As you can see, the helicopter option is cheaper than the car option. This is a New York thing, right? That's a New York thing. So, but basically, this is possible only because Google Maps and the other companies, Waze and all the other companies who do digital mapping, all of these applications, they started abstracting out the problem. So then people started forgetting about that underlying problem, and you think about problems above, right? This is the core concept of abstractions. This is higher order thinking. This is basically elevating your problems, right? But then what's the future of this? So Rania said, yes, you need Google Maps to get from point A to point B, right? And Google Maps provides you a really good way of doing that. So you say, I want to get from here to here, and you know Google even plays God mode, right? So let's say there are 100 cars driving down the road. It realizes that there is a traffic pattern, there's a traffic issue, and then basically it says 60 of these cars I'm going to route this way, but 40 of the cars I'm going to route this way. It doesn't route everyone the same way, because if it does that, you're going to just shift the red line from here to there, right? So they do play God mode. So they do all of these things, right? And it gives you a scenic path if you want to. It gives you a fuel-efficient path if you want to. And I think in US, I don't know, in Sri Lanka, in US it defaults to a fuel-efficient path, which is sometimes very annoying because it sends you maybe 3 miles extra where you could have just spent a minute more, cut down on 2 miles, and gotten to your location faster. That's because it's a fuel-efficient route, right? It's good to go at 60 miles per hour or 80 kilometers per hour than take a minute longer, right? But now you have the Robo-taxis, you have the Zooks from Amazon, you have Waymos, you have the Tesla ones. I think other manufacturers like BYD and so on and so forth are also coming up with these concepts where you don't have to worry about what's my location A, what's my location B, how do I get there? So this is an outcome, right? What do I want to do? I want to get to a location. I just get in one place, sit down, and it gets me to that location. So that's the future. So you're moving from abstractions to abstractions on top of that, to abstracting business, to basically going towards an outcome, right? And everyone's thinking, what's the outcome I want to achieve? So once this happens, people will start thinking, what next, right? What do I do about this? What do I do about this? And that's the future, right? So humans have always been thinking about abstractions. It's a human thing, right? From the cave ages, from back in the day, people have been thinking, how do I build better tools? How do I solve this problem so that people can solve problems on top of this? How do I build the brick? How do I build the concrete structure so that you can build houses and buildings and skyscrapers, right? So 3 examples here. The light switch. You switch on the switch, and a light comes on. You don't think about the grid, whether there is a backup grid, whether it's AC or DC, how long is that taking over time, and then what's the energy source? Is it hydro or nuclear or whatnot, right? You're flying today, and you basically just have a boarding pass. That's your abstraction, right? You're not thinking about what the airline is, what's the jet fuel, whether the wind is below or the wind is above, and all of that conversation, right? None of those, right? And of course, payments as well, right? Like, is this a gold standard? So I recently realized, so US and most of the world has used to what is called a fiat standard, which is not based on gold, right? So in the past, everything was based on gold. I think a number of years ago, we all moved to this standard, which is based on nothing, and which is one of the reasons why there are all these financial issues. But then that's inevitable, right? Because gold is also limited. So, but you don't think of those things, right? So it is a human aspect as well. So in technology, for the last 40, 50 years, we've been thinking about abstractions this way, right? So if you look at what the computers did, right? You moved from bits and bytes to CPUs and computers. You abstracted infrastructure with this thing called Kubernetes, right? And we are betting big on Kubernetes. We are building everything on top of Kubernetes, right? AWS came up and said, forget about everything, forget about data centers, about servers, about this and that. What's the type of server you need? Click this, and you get that, right? So they totally abstracted the infrastructure layer, the resources layer, right? So in AWS, and then you have multiple companies doing that as well. You have the integration problem. We built Ballerina, and Ballerina is an absolutely brilliant language at abstracting a lot of integration problems. And you can even start thinking about Ballerina for something like healthcare, which is a business domain, right? So we spoke about FHIR. Ballerina integrates or abstracts the integration, the connectivity, the data streaming, plus the data standards. So that's a really good abstraction on top of technology problems, right? And so these are different waves of abstractions, from Kubernetes to internal developer platforms to platform engineering to the logic, right? So logic, you had the programming language, you had the fourth generation programming language, you had low code and no code and all of those. And now all of a sudden we have AI, as Rania said, 17x productivity for coding use cases. And you put something in, you get something out, and you don't really worry about what that is written in and what the logic is. So the opportunities there are endless, right? So technology is a really good place to think about these abstractions, and the interface is really moving higher up as we go along this journey. But now, from technology abstractions, and we've had many sessions, right, around technology abstractions over the last couple of years, we need to start thinking about what a business abstraction is. So if you take technology abstractions, if you think of it as Lego, right? So if you say API gateway is a Lego building block, integration is a building block, and we have many building blocks, right? Over the past number of years, WSO2 has had, like, at one point, 26 building blocks, yes, Lego pieces, right? And then you can put these pieces together in many forms as well. You put a data service piece, you put another piece, and you call it something else, right? So we had all of those. We then allow you to deploy in multiple ways, right? So you can do on-premises, within your data center, in your private cloud, as a hybrid, as SaaS. So you have infinite possibilities of building with this Lego, right? So that's an absolute great thing. That's one of our value propositions. We meet you where you are. We are infinitely flexible. You can take the identity server and basically infinitely extend it. So that's one of our value propositions today, right? So that's a great value proposition. That will continuously remain because core technology is important, right? That's not going to change. Right? But the problem with that sometimes is there's another guy who has a building block and another guy who has a building block, and at some point you start thinking about commodity, right? So at some point we started saying gateway is a commodity, right? Yes, we can have a cloud-native gateway, a Kubernetes-based gateway, a VM-based gateway, and so on and so forth. But now we need to start thinking about federating with other gateways, because customers say, yeah, you have a gateway, but so what? Right? I have a gateway, you have a gateway. I wrote my own gateway. That's commodity. Let's start thinking about a higher level. So we started thinking about federating across different gateways, right? So that's where this picture comes. This is the Millennium Falcon. This has been a dream of my son for a long time. It was $400, I think, like 7 years ago. He started saving up. It's now $1,000, right? Inflation, so he's moved on. So what do you get between Lego blocks and a Millennium Falcon? So you get a guide on how to build a Falcon. You get a clear set of pieces. You get a satisfaction of saying, okay, I built this is what I get. You get an outcome. You get the documentation, everything around a Millennium Falcon, right? So that's what we want to sell. So can we move from blocks to selling the Falcon, right? So that's basically the theme. Now, how do you talk business, right? So again, the technology part is very, very important. So we don't change anything overnight, right? So I'm not preaching we change anything overnight. That remains. But how do you talk outcomes? So this is a table that shows, okay, if you're going to say 4 nines uptime, Maybe what does that mean? That maybe means in a healthcare space, it's like an uninterrupted patient care. In a retail space, that means you can handle Black Friday traffic without an issue, right? We will continue to scale up, right? If you say multi-region gateways, so that, again, multi-region gateways is very important. We have a number of customers around the world. We have some customers in Europe as well who handles massive load when it comes to Black Friday traffic, peak traffic, and they need to scale up 10x or whatever during that period. So it's very important that you have multi-regional gateways, you have auto-scaling, you have auto-healing. But what's the value of that? The value is that you can support all of this scaling traffic, right? A very interesting thing at the bottom there I've added is this concept of system of action. So Asanka spoke about system of record, right, in the diagram, and Sanjeeva alluded to it as well. Now there's this concept and these conversations happening about, is the system of record still that very important thing? Or are we now going to talk about the outcomes of a system of record, which is a system of action? What is a system of record supposed to do? So in banking, you have the core banking systems, which store all the information. Do we need to store that? Can we do something else when you think about outcomes? So that's where you have these agentic workflows, you have a lot of AI workflows coming in, you have context graphs, and all of these other concepts that have been blended about when you talk about these systems of record, right? And then I'm going to talk a little bit more about this REST API documentation, which talks about onboarding costs. It's a very important concept, right? And API developer portals for self-service, so on and so forth, right? So again, this is up to each team to look at your products and see what are the technical features, what are the capabilities, what are the outcomes of these things, and how can we push the outcomes better. So let's take a case study. Imagine a bank, and so I'm not mentioning customer names because this has to go public. Last time I did it, I mentioned all the customer names because that was my talk, and my talk was not published. So yeah. So let's take a case study, right? So we've had many of these deployment of like an API management and an identity access manager in a bank, right? Yes, integration as well, right? So it's a simple architecture, right? You have the core banking systems. Let's say you have FIS Global or some system. You have an integration layer that connects to these core banking systems. You have the connectors that we built. We have a solutions BU. We have a vertical team. We've been doing this for a long time. So we know all the connectors. We built the connectors as well, right? It can move from any format to a canonical format that is required for financial industry. All good, right? So you can do that quickly. The second part is how do you expose these as APIs internally and externally? So when you expose these externally, how do you make them available as open banking APIs? Maybe if this is a European customer, how do you make them available to third-party providers? How do you expose this in a developer portal so that it is self-service accessible to external application developers, right? So all good. How do you then get identity access management in there, integrate, federate to maybe Ping and Okta that they have, or federate to an Active Directory if they have a user store there? How do you do multi-factor authentication and single sign-on, etc. Right? So let's take that scenario, and maybe multi-cloud. Now, there'll be a technical view of that, right? So we talk to a technical person, and the conversation with him or her is about, we are using an API gateway for quality of service, right? What's the performance? What's the throughput of the API gateway? We are using a developer portal to publish APIs. So let's have one internally, let's have one externally. The reason for that is security doesn't like exposing internal APIs externally, right? So let's do that. Let's do a multi-regional deployment because we need to have resiliency and failover and blah-de-blah-de-blah, right? So all good. But then there'll be a product manager, an enterprise architect who comes and asks, okay, let's talk about the outcomes of this. So what are the outcomes? What are the technical outcomes? So there's a self-service API, which means when a partner comes in, I don't need to have a team go and talk to that partner and onboard them and things like that. I just point them to this API. We were working with a financial organization. It took them 5 years to get internal approval to publish this external API. So until that time, the way external partners access information is by screen scraping. And that is still, by the way, a common way of third-party applications interacting with banks, right? Screen scraping. So we had one customer who wanted to monetize the screen scraping experience, so they started exposing APIs. Not because of open banking, but just to monetize the screen scraping experience and control the number of people just reading through their website every day, right? Single login means some customers can log in with their Google login or with their enterprise login. So you have multi-factor, you have federated authentication, so that allows you to do that, right? So there are technical outcomes that someone can start looking at as well. So you have the technical capabilities and the technical outcomes. But then the business person comes in and starts talking about the business value conversation, right? So if you're doing self-service APIs, if you're doing identity federation, what does that mean? So that means for the bank, it's maybe a faster onboarding period of their partners. So if you think of a bank, right, and especially investment banks or wealth management customers, it's very important for them to add more customers, right? So for WSO2, one of our big metrics is the number of new logos we get. Right? Retention and all of that is there, but the number of new logos is a very important metrics for us. If that is dependent on how soon we can add them into Salesforce, and if it takes like 4 months to add them into Salesforce, so onboarding them, to interact with them, that's an issue, right? So for a bank, for a wealth management institute, the faster they can onboard a customer and start getting transactions coming through, the better for them, the more revenue for them, so that they can start, and the lesser effort they need to put into that, the better for them, because then they can start talking to the other customer and put the same amount of effort into the other customers, right? So fast onboarding, get the onboarding time from 4 months, which is manual today, to maybe 1 week. So you have roughly 3.5 weeks or whatever of, not 3.5 weeks, yeah, my math is wrong, right? Some roughly 35 weeks or whatever savings there, right? So there is, and you can basically calculate this is the amount of time a person spends on onboarding, and this is the time period, so I can save you this much time, right? We were talking recently to a healthcare customer in the US, and in US you have this thing called prior authorization, claim management, right? A person spends 30 minutes, a doctor spends 30 minutes filling out information about your insurance each time a patient visits, and then the patient leaves, right? So they spend 30 minutes per claim. So if a doctor visits 200 patients a day, they spend 30 minutes, which is an administrative overhead, an administrative burden per doctor. And the doctor doesn't want to do that in the US. They want to see patients. The more patients you see, the more revenue, better healthcare, all of those things, right? So one of the value propositions in AI and agents is that you can bring that time from 30 minutes to 4 minutes, which is a 26-minute saving, right? So if you can have a 26-minute saving per patient per day, that into 200 patients a day, that's your value sale, right? So then the conversation is different. You're not selling API manager, you're not selling an agent manager, you're selling an outcome saying, we can save you 26 minutes of time per patient, that into 200, that's our promise. We'll do you a POC, we'll do a 90-day trial or whatever, let's solve this for you, right? So that's the business value conversation. All right, so we have had customers, so we talk to customers today who come to us after doing this evaluation, right? So take an example. Let's say there's a customer, they want to do custom onboarding, right? So they basically, the business person goes to the technical person and says, I want to do custom onboarding. The technical person then starts to figure out what is required for this, and they figure out that you need maybe an API platform, you need self-service APIs. Then they talk to the technical team. The technical team goes out and does an evaluation of, let's say, the top people in Gartner, the top people in Forrester. They Google open source API manager, and then they come to us. 5, 6, 7, 8 steps after the problem, they come fill a contact us form, we talk to them, right? But there are still some companies who still are stuck at that level. They say, I want to solve the customer onboarding problem for banks. Who are the vendors who are out there for that? And many technology companies don't show up when you look for that. But we have exactly what is required for that area. So So if you look at a case study of the same problem from a business perspective, right? So if you're doing custom onboarding, there's a time to value, there is a revenue acceleration problem, there is a headcount problem, and the amount of people you can put in for these headcounts. These are all on the slides, right? So can we talk that language? It's the same technology again, different outcomes. Can we talk business outcomes, right? So that's basically the takeaway from this. And by doing this, you now are moving from talking core technology, talking commodity language at some point, and to start talking business value, right, which is very important. But again, that doesn't mean core technology is not important. That's very, very important, right? So we are not selling vaporware. We're selling core technology. But can we talk the business language? Can we talk the outcomes as well so that we get both ends of the world? We get the core technology as well as the higher value sale, right? All right. So how do we do this? We have brilliant teams. We have brilliant engineers. We are all technical people here. We have brilliant products, and we have a great vision. The whole agentic story and the AI story is really interesting because that's a new paradigm shift. And we are all part of that paradigm shift. We are all starting on equal footing again, which is very exciting, right? This is like when API management and APIs came out. Of course, some vendors had a little bit of a head start, but then everyone started jumping on the bandwagon, right? So at this point as well, AI is one of them. It's an interesting time to be in. So find out what your technology is, where your customers are, what are they trying to do, what's the stitching cost of putting your technology together, right? How long does it take to deploy? What are they trying to do? Think of the outcomes when you build software, right? So even when you're doing testing or even when you're doing development or building features or pricing, think of the outcomes, right? If you do that, we can start pricing per outcome or pricing per value, not just pricing based on cores and transactions, right? So that's a different way of thinking about pricing. Even in US healthcare is moving to pricing per outcome versus pricing per visit. Because a visit means you're coming for a visit. But if you have a problem, if you have a cold, I'll solve the cold for you, and we'll try to measure that, right? So pricing per outcome. So, and then basically when you start talking to people, yes, we talk to the technical people, but at some point we need to get to the person who owns the problem space, the business person, right? So that's basically the pivot. So to wrap things up, the theme of today's session is this whole wind beneath the wings of the agentic enterprise, right? So we're selling the fabric. But if you think of this is the ultimate abstraction, right? So to build agentic AI, to build anything, you need to solve the underlying problem first. You need to get your house in order first. Let's take healthcare as an example. If you want to build a really good contact center agent in healthcare, so we show that example, right? You can't do that if you have 20 different medical record systems and 5 different billing systems, and none of those are integrated and they don't talk the same language. You can't imagine trying to get business value from an agentic AI use case if that system is broken. We are one of the very few companies out there who gives you the whole stack, right? We can solve that problem, we can solve the API problem, we can solve the agent problem, the building problem, the security problem, so on and so forth. So that's the ultimate abstraction. So that's the takeaway from this talk, right? Abstractions are important. You need to think in outcomes. We have the ultimate abstraction. I'll leave you with this quote that I find interesting. Laziness is an important thing in life, right? It is because we are lazy that we create abstractions, we find better ways of doing things. Heck, we built self-driving cars now, right? So my daughter is trying to drive. I told her, don't bother, right? We have self-driving cars. In a couple of years, we'll have self-driving cars, right? Sri Lanka will be a bit different. Getting self-driving cars is a bit different, very challenging, but we'll get there, right? So thank you. If you have any questions, I'll be around. We can chat. But yeah, have a great rest of the day. Thank you.